Hey everybody, welcome back to the Body Movement Podcast. My name's Allison. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm a physical therapist, little health nut about our healthcare system. And my brother's a guy who is also into all of those things. No, he's got an exercise science background. He's got a big love for fitness and working out, as many other things.
I'm an enthusiast, Allison.
I know you are.
I know. A supporter of all our experts in this fine field.
Very much a supporter. Yes, he's great. So, and today we are welcoming Matt June, who is a personal trainer and does a whole lot of stuff with not only golf, which is a little bit of what he does, but more so with the youth population and prepping students and prepping young athletes for fitness for life. And that's kind of what struck our fancy to connect a little bit, is kind of our passion for taking care of our kids through the fitness journey and the athletic journey. So Matt, if you want to give your background for us and tell us a little about yourself, that'd be great.
Welcome to the pod, my friend.
What I was saying was that even though I'm considered a strength and conditioning coach or a performance coach, whatever that means to everybody, really my profession is being a mentor to all youth, but primarily my role is for youth athletes right now. I started in the private sector right after I left SUNY Cortland, where I got a graduate degree in exercise science and an undergrad in kines. Went right into the private world where it was only youth athletes. So 6 years of schooling, and then I walked into the real world and I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I go to school for 6 years? Because I have no idea what I'm talking about or doing, because these youth athletes, they need more than the textbooks just taught me. And I didn't realize it, even though I was a kid and an athlete. So it took me another 6 years down there to kind of just realize what it was that I wanted to do and kind of have more of a mission for what my job was. And when I left there to move back to my hometown, I left there making that fact of, all right, I'm a mentor to these kids. I don't care about how much they back squat. I don't care about this and that. I care about that I'm some level of a mentor or a guide or someone to lean on, and I'm helping these kids in any which way possible. When I moved home, I was the strength coach at a college in our area. COVID hit, and then after that, I was doing construction. And I'm like, what is going on here? I'm not doing what I love. And I got back into, I guess we'll call it the personal training world, but really it was golf athletes, a sector I really hadn't had much time working with, but I had a TPI certification and I started rocking and rolling, and it was great because I still got youth. I got a lot of adults, got a lot of parents who teach me a lot about their own kids. And with that being said, now I've moved on to back to where I kind of started, where I'm a strength coach at a high school in this area. You know, that is what my profession always was. And I'm able to reach a community of from fifth grade all the way to seniors in high school, and then once they graduate. So I got a little bit of both worlds there. And again, that's kind of where I'm at right now with my profession, and that's the population I see for both from the private and the high school setting.
It's always interesting when we get these experts that we've had on, Al, and mostly in your network in the health and movement field, how all the schooling and like you come out and it takes just a different mind to see that like what you learn in school has almost minimal application to the problems that you encounter with the population you're interacting with. And this is why Allison said right off the bat, she's passionate about the healthcare system and like revamping it or, you know, rethinking it. But most people just don't have that eye. It feels like it's innate in people like you and Al to just kind of see it and be like, oh, this doesn't even make sense. Like the best practices or whatever is being taught to us and how to, you know, pass that down to who you're supposed to be teaching it to, and imposing and teaching those people how to apply all these lessons that from the wealth of knowledge you were supposed to kind of gather during those 6 years.
Well, I can give you one quick, at least from my field, PT, to become a physical therapist, to become a chiropractor, to become a doctor. Those paths are different, and I won't speak on because I didn't do it. But to become a coach, you don't need anything other than a certification that has zero application of coaching. So no hands-on. So you have people who have the same certification as I do, which is apparently the top one in this country, but they've never coached before in their entire life.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you could be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't even know how to have a conversation with whoever that is, whether it's an adult or a kid, you're never going to get your point across, or you're not going to be doing, a good service for your population. So it's the education system in itself is a problem for this. We're supposed to be all working together, and yet, a PT and a strength coach, they're almost looked at as separate people when we should be working together. It's a very flawed system, and obviously we all know we're trying our best to at least change small portions of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I find a couple of things interesting. Is one, and I would say I've known a number of personal trainers who ended up doing construction or ended up doing something different outside of their field of what they're passionate about, just because it is hard, and I think it's hard in many ways. It's hard. It's hard to do what you love. It's hard to find the time. It's hard to get people to invest. It's very hard to get people to invest in themselves, right? I mean, Matt, you both know me. I mean, in the, from the cash-based PT side, it's moving a little bit more into the people we're getting are ready to invest. Like they're ready. They know what to expect coming in, but it was a huge change in this area when we started doing it 2 or 3 years ago, where people they're like, what? You don't do this? It's what? How much? And versus like, what's the quality? What do you need? And, the personal training world is so that, right? It's like, are you going through motions? Are you exercising? Are you working out? Are you programming? Are you investing? Are you making changes for life for people? Or are you just giving them a workout that might actually be exhausting them and making them feel worse? And I just think there's a lot in all professions, but in the personal training world of how to make it work and how to make it work well and how to have a clientele stay with you and follow you, right? Because everybody's out for the shiny objects, right? So I don't know if you can talk about that, but when you get people, and in youth, it's even a little bit worse because you have the athletes who are finding their identity. And then you have parents who have an identity already made for this kid. and they're trying to, maybe sometimes, not all parents, but some are trying to push them in a certain direction. Some with scholarship desires, obviously, financially, that makes a difference. How do you get people to see the longevity of what you're doing? And that, we know clinically the foundations are important. I'm not going to have you cleaning right now because you can't do this. But if they went somewhere else, they'd be cleaning and potentially getting hurt. So how do you fight that?
Well, it's interesting because, like I said, I was in a facility that had 8 full-time strength coaches at the time. That's the world I lived in. And we saw hundreds of athletes daily. So it was a constant, both from a business side and then from a training side. We had to correlate those two things and say, okay, what makes sense here? Are we doing the right things? And we changed our philosophy every year. There was 1 year we didn't back squat. Then we only taught the front squat. We cleaned, we didn't clean. Okay, we were like, oh, you know what? We're just using sleds because we were watching these kids get faster. So first off, I think the ability, to be open-minded is how you even start that conversation. Because as a coach, if you can't be that way, or coach, practitioner, doesn't matter what it is, if you don't have an open mind to be able to say, you know what, it's just not working, I got to drop my ego and do whoever your population is. Like I said, mine is mostly youth. So if I am not doing something that's helping them, I don't care. I'll throw it right out. Give me 6 years of education. I think it works. Oh, it doesn't work. You prove me wrong. I'll switch it just like that.
Yeah.
The reason I start with that is because I think the mentality of a lot of, in my field, I'll hear so many coaches say, well, I did this. I did a powerlifting regimen and I got really good at sport. Really? You played junior college sports for a year, and if you're gauging your success on you played 1 year of college and you didn't get an injury, but now you can't walk at 35 years old because your knee hurts because you back swell all the time and you're going to the chiropractor every week. That to me is just someone who's uneducated. And honestly, we know ego is a real thing. I'm not saying that we can't have one, but that mentality is where I'm about to go with this is that mentality has allowed me to, when I moved home from Westchester, I came back to an area where I had a pretty good name as an athlete and as a kid. 10 years later, I'm nobody. I'm just, oh yeah, hi, I'm Matt. I think I know everything about strength and conditioning. Nobody's listening to me. And then I went into a golf population that I had never worked with. So I was training golfers at high level high school, high level middle school, actually, and some very competitive adult golfers. In the golf world, if you don't know anything about it, they will sense BS the second they walk in. So they're used to having a coach, right? So I have to also provide a selling point, right? From the business perspective, I have to also come in and I have an assessment, and I make it super kind of relaxed at this point. And I'm going through the TPI assessment, doing this, and they're asking me all this questions. So here's the deal. If you and I can't relate or communicate, we're not even working together, because I'm going to waste your money. And I've seen that especially with adults. The more and more blunt I am about things and just tell them, like, here it is, here's who I am. I don't have a special program for you, because you, me, the next person, we're all different. I might squat with that person, but you're just only doing lunging, because every time you squat, you have an issue. Why am I gonna squat? It doesn't make any sense. And then in terms of the retention piece, when you get someone in the door, in the private sector, okay, there's a ton of different psychological methods and business models on how you keep them there. But like for me, I just constantly be open, and I'll experiment. You know how many times a kid has said, Coach Matt, this just doesn't feel right. How about we try it this way? I'm like, love it. Your exercise now, do it. But so many people just are afraid to really, it's a lack of education and experience, right? You know this. I've been doing it not for that long. I'm no master, but this is my 10th year in this field. I was also an athlete who did this as an athlete too. I know it doesn't work for me, but that doesn't mean it won't work for you, Yeah. So being able to have an open mind and all of those other pieces, being able to communicate, that's what leads to retention. That's what leads to buy-in. That's what leads to, okay, now I've worked with a kid for 8 years. And when they graduate college, or say, wow, thank you for telling me I didn't need to back squat all the time, because it didn't help me at all. But at the same time, I've taught them physical fitness for life. And sometimes that can be the biggest goal for my kids right now.
Yeah, that's just a common theme we've seen to date is that outsourcing of thought. I did it this way, so it works, and just not understanding how much has changed in the field in the past 10 years, let alone 20 or 30, however these people came up. And then the other thing I've seen prominent is, I'll use bodybuilding as an example. Like, oh, well, this world famous champion did that, so it has to work. And it's just like, one, you're ignoring awesome genetics, all the other 100,000 different types of fucking exercises they did, and then all the nutrition and all the other programs. There's 100,000 variables. And you're focused on Arnold used to do, bench presses by rotating his wrist. And it's just like, well, but he was also using 150-pound dumbbells, so he was going to get the results. So I think there's I did it this way, and I've seen success in high profile people doing it that way. So it has to be right. And the length that what Alice has talked about is how much research has changed and doesn't find its way into the field until 10, 20 years later, is constantly changing. So you must have to invest so much time in nipping those conversations in the bud, like up front with people. As you said, to get into it, it's like, hey, we're going to take this case by case with you, and maybe some of that stuff works and maybe it doesn't, but those initial conversations have to be so much time and energy for people like you and Allison. They're coming on and maybe taking a slightly different approach from what the rest of the industry is.
Yeah, and I find, I definitely find the ability of professionals, any professional, to pivot with the human being is what makes people stay or not, or the power of a referral network, right? Matt, like Matt and you and I have talked about that a ton, is like, the benefit of a proper referral that has similar concepts and values to you. So you've been back in the capital region 2 years now, right? No, well, not in pre-COVID, a little bit, but it's the unity between professions isn't great for healthcare. And I don't think that's unique here. I think that is a picture of the global piece, but that ability to say, like, if I see somebody that's working with Matt, that I can say, oh, we might not have the same exact approach, but we have the same concepts. You don't need to back squat all the time. If back squatting is the goal, number one, why is it a goal? Does it even matter? And then, maybe I'll nitpick on the PT side of little mobility things that can help to get them to back squat. If for some reason that's a goal, they want to compete in something. And then if it's a goal, then we break it down and work. If it's not a goal, then we pivot and do something else. So, I think there's a point to, we were just kind of with my previous patient chatting about it of, 80% of that workout, and Matt and I have talked about this a ton, is, 80% of the workout is your general preparation program. It is squat and lunge and push and pull and carry, but it would look different for everybody. So those squats will look different for everybody, depending on where you are and what you have and what your goals are. And, a squat is still a squat for a 90-year-old as it is for an NFL player, but they're doing different ones. Maybe they aren't. I don't know. But then,
right.
The movement prep of how you prepare your body, not a generalized warm up, which we all do, right? We have generalized warm ups for warm up programs, but if somebody's not getting it, and then we kind of break it down and get them better into a better movement preparation where they're hitting key spots on their body that need to improve, then enhances the general preparation program. So movement prep, general preparation are two key pieces, and sometimes they overlap, but they just look different from individual to individual. And in our world, in the PT world or the medicine side, everybody's talking the patient-centered approach. And that's the crap that's not taught in school yet, of how to individualize or how to communicate. How do you communicate with people? Like, how do you say that? And until we're getting to a point where we're better able to communicate with people, I think fitness wise, we struggle as a society because we're getting different input from so many people. So yeah, I don't know, from your programming, Matt, like how you see those things kind of fall out of specificity, because we have our thoughts of what people need to do to live and move. We know what a golf swing needs to look like. We do. Him and I are both TPI certified. So we have a similar language where we know that we need to single leg balance. We need to have mobile lats. We need to have good hips. Like, we know this stuff. But then when we come down to program for people, how we put it together is the art, and how we communicate that is 80-90% of how that person does.
100%. And the interesting example I just said is I went back into the high school world. So every day right now, for about a 4-hour period, I see a total of about 100 athletes. Let's just call it an average. I can be super organized. I know the programming. Okay. I understand how it works. I know how to modify on the fly. I can have the most beautiful program in the world. The whole gym is set up. But then I never even explained why we're doing anything. Guess what happens? Like we talked about, you start losing retention. People are just like, what am I doing? Like, what'd you do in workout today? I don't know. Coach June just kind of told us we're doing squats, and we did squats.
Yeah.
You have to find the fine line, though. Again, my population is a lot of youth. So I have to explain the why. I have to add in the fun. I have to make sure it's moving. I have to vary it. All of a sudden, the other day, sun came out. We went right out to the field. No weights involved. It was the most productive day we had with one of my teams. Yep. Cutting at a high force, sprinting, having fun. And, it's funny.
Yeah.
I have to educate them, but I also have to educate coaches. It's going to come to a time where I'm going to have to educate the parents. And again, I always try to start these messages by like, guys, I am not an expert, but this is my profession. And I'm willing to bet that if I don't have the answer, I can at least go to Allison and say, hey, she might be a great source for you or a great source for me because I don't have the answer. But I can tell you one thing. I've been working with this population, and if you're an accountant as a parent, I got this side of it. Let me just handle this side, and I understand it. And sport coaches is another thing that, I have to deal with. It's a good thing. But you have sport coaches who, like we talked about, they had something that they did 30 years ago, and they're teaching weight room stuff. If you don't have a strength coach at a high school, obviously that's very difficult. I mean, if you don't have a personal trainer in the private sector, it's very difficult to know. But I'm dealing with right now a lot of kids where the programming end of it, to answer the question, it's kind of like I have this structure that I think works, but I don't care. I'll change it right off the bat. I will. One of my groups just lost their privilege to deadlift because they didn't understand the why. They refused to listen to me to set their back and get tension in the bar. I said, great. It's not a consequence. But as a group, unfortunately, if you want to get better at the deadlift, I have open hours at the gym. You can come visit me. But right now, we're not doing it. We're going to do something else that feels better and for the whole group works. Yep. But from programming, again, my background was programming. I learned everything about training the athlete from a programming standpoint, and we get way too held up on one method or this protocol works, and it's not the case.
Yeah.
So I want to bridge this in a little bit into the specialization side. Yes. So we're going to start with when you have those beautiful programs, which you do, and the kids come in exhausted. That's a big one too, right? They're tired. They had a few years ago, I'll never forget it. I was doing an ACL, risk reduction prevention, whatever the hell name we want to give it, program. And based on gym time, I could only fit the class in at 7:00 at night. Now I had a structured 6-week progressive program I want to do. And these girls are coming to me and they've already been to 2 practices. And I'm their last stop of the night before they go home to do homework, before they go there. And I never ran it again. I never ran it again because they were so tired. And the things I was asking them to do, their bodies weren't even there. Their minds were toast. And they clearly were just fatigued. So, I think the exhaustion side, especially impacting our kiddos these days, is a big deal, and isn't, something that we look at a lot, from a programming side, or if they have team weight lifts. And I'm not saying you, Matt, I'm saying if they're, have a weight room and they've had a workout on the board and they're just showing up to do it without guidance, and they're coming in and they're exhausted. And, what's the benefit of that versus the harm? So I think, leading into kind of this conversation we want to have about, how our kids specialize in sports these days early, and how much they're doing on a daily basis that is too much for them. How are we counteracting that? How do we get after that and, do what's best for our children. Right?
Yeah. And I want to even take it even a step further for the people that are coming from my background of, not even understanding this stuff to the level you two are. Cause I want to touch on, Matt, you said, the day it was nice outside, you went and you had fun on the field, and you were doing stuff, and how productive that was. And, it was not only, the specialization of programming from a standpoint of a specific program for a specific activity, but programming from a specific or non-specific motivation type of standpoint, where it's hey, we're trying to train you for something maybe that you like, but we're also just trying to get you to enjoy this stuff you're doing. And so where do you see all of that stuff Allison just ranted on? And then those two kind of fields, how do you level set, and how do you look at this specialization area that is kind of a hot topic debate for, I think, the past 10, 20 years with kids? You're probably getting a mix and mash of kids coming to you at whatever age. How do you level set for kids that are maybe already probably too specialized, and kind of almost wean them off of that? And then how do you kind of implement your overall arching strategy? Hey, this is where I'm starting kind of with everyone and whittling down to the athlete level.
Got a lot there on your plate.
Yeah.
Go for it.
But
I'm going to try to stay
I'm
going to try to stay as tactful as possible. So just
don't do it.
You don't have to
let it go, man. Let it rip.
only so I don't go too far, because I'll go down a rabbit hole real quick.
Okay.
First off, just in general, I think one of the main issues with specialization is the word. I hate it. It's just like sports specific. I hate the word.
Functional.
Let's not even start there. But the word specialization, right? It gets passed around. We might have three definitions amongst ourselves, but you got parents, kids, coaches never played, whatever it is. And we need that definition first of what do we even think that is, right? If you think that your kid should be specializing in a sport at 12 years old, that's just an uneducated thought process. It's not that you're wrong or right. It's just like you need to educate yourself on that doesn't make any sense. And when you go back to like the professional athlete, like, oh, well, so-and-so did it. Well, there's a 0.0001% that they were going to do that, whether they played 27 sports or no sports. They had the genetics. So
you always point to the outliers, right?
It's just, again, I really think it becomes, and I use uneducation as a term as not disrespectful. It's just, you're not educated. If you want to make the claims about specialization, just educate yourself. It's free education right now. You can go look.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? Like there's enough statistics, and like we talked about with research, the research is there with stats to know that like you're seeing a higher level of injury when you're really specializing. But again, specializing in what? I have a lot of golfers right now, so I use that example, right? Because it's a new population, and I see kids who, let's just call it, they're specialized, but they're really not. Their parents aren't making them do anything. They play a highly skilled sport where if you're not swinging a golf club, honestly, year round right now, but it doesn't mean it's every day for 10 hours. That's the issue. We think specialization, and like everything else in our world, we're going polar opposites. He golfs every single day. He's specialized already. Well, guess what? My middle school golfers who are specialized because they technically only compete for real on a high level stage of golf. We played spike ball the other night out in our parking lot. We play Nerf basketball every single time they come in. We play wall ball. So the way to kind of merge into like the way I've been combating it over the last couple of years is if I'm starting to sense that maybe your sport, you're only getting this level of high competition in the golf world, I'm going to provide it in another setting. We already know there's an issue with physical education, both in the it's actually showing up, but participate. You can be right at 15 years old, 16 years old. Maybe you're really good at one sport and you're playing that sport at a high level, but you're still doing rec sports and we're still getting strength and conditioning. That's not specialization. Right. That's just the kid really likes this sport and he's really good at it, or he or she is really good at it. So the definition of specialization is, in my eyes, why there's always a debate, because everybody defines it differently. We know this. Yeah. At a young age, you should be exposed to everything for really two different reasons. One, we know that kids might pick their path and we don't want burnout. Maybe they're like, hey, listen, I really love baseball. I'm going to go play it. I want to go pro. Yep. But that's their choice. We have to guide them as coaches and as practitioners and as parents. But in the same breath, if you're playing a bunch of different sports, you now have the ability to learn better, right? Motor learning, basic stuff. Yeah. You start to get really good at multiple different movements and sports and whatever, and being around kids socially. Yep. But who knows what that does to you later on in life? So I think, without getting too long-winded,
it's a great point. All right. No, yeah.
I was just going to finish it with up and saying, like, the definition is so important because what are we talking about, right? If I could really care less if the whole world hears me talking right now, but I have to deal with, a whole group of juniors and seniors getting ready for that college process. Well, 97% of them, they might not even go to play college sports. Why are you picking one sport? Well, I'm dealing with it right now. I've had this conversation with some of my juniors, like, why don't you want to play? It's going to be your senior year. Coach Matt, I'm not having fun. Our team is not that great. I don't have any friends on the team. So I'm going to go work for half the year and then that's it. Well, okay, well, maybe he got burnt out or she got burnt out, or she's 18 years old. He's 18 years old. And he's like, I'm just good with sports. And then you have someone else who plays all these sports and they have all these aspirations to go, play rec sports in college. Great. Yeah. There's so many different ways to look at it, so many variables. I think we just got to be very careful whenever you debate the topic. Yeah. Just define it with your population of what you're talking about for specialization.
Yeah. Do you define it as this kid's only doing this activity and only training for that activity and not doing anything else? Is it that, like, you have to go that, and maybe I just butchered it myself, but because there's a great point in there where a kid can be great at one sport. That's all they really compete in, but they're doing a bunch of other stuff with their friends. They ride a bike, they go out and fuck around and play tag or whatever.
Yeah.
And that in itself is generalization, and they're doing all this other stuff that'll allow them to be okay in the one sport they actually compete at a high level because they're doing all this other things. You probably have to look at it like, oh my God, case by case. Okay, that one's fine. This parent has them they have an activity every day of the week and they don't even train and they're just kind of moving around and they're just staying after the hobbies. Like, you could probably cut this 100 different ways or more. And so how do you define the specialization where you start to see this manifest poorly in kids with like injuries and overuse and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. So I worked a lot with the baseball and softball community for a while.
Yeah.
And that's, especially with baseball, we see it at the younger level. So when I'm defining specialization, that's when I'm saying, let's just call it ages 12 to by the time you're, let's say, a junior, okay, just for the general point of this definition. If in that time period, sport is causing some level of negativity in your life, injury, burnout, friends problems, social problems, whatever it is, if it's causing a negative impact because of the sport, then I'm saying, okay, there's a specialization because because you're playing one sport and everything is into that. But I also have to be careful. What happens if you have somebody who I've had, female basketball player, plays Division I basketball right now. Her love for basketball since the day I met her in 8th grade was unbelievable. She just loved it. She practiced it all on her own. Her parents didn't force anything upon her.
Yep.
She had so much passion for the sport. She did all the other things as kids. She was the class president. She did all these things. She's just a great human being. Mm-hmm. She went on to play D1. She went through a massive injury because of basketball, but it wasn't an overuse injury. It was just a freak injury.
Right.
You can easily switch that and say, well, she played too much basketball. She hurt her knee. Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
This girl, never once did she get burnt out.
Yeah.
No family, in her environment, both from a training set, she was just so that individual still exists too. Again, the extremes. When I'm looking at it, I'm just saying, is your sport causing something that's negative? And that's both, the long term, because we have to think that way, because not everyone thinks it. They think, like we talked about in the very beginning, scholarship. That is a way too short term, and honestly, not another uneducated thought process where is the specialization helping anything in their life? I just don't like the word. Like I said, it's tough for me to define because of the extremes. Like we talked about with programming, I haven't really seen too many big issues. I train a lot of parents as well, especially down in Westchester where I was, and I trained parents of the kids I was training. I never really saw it. Parents were super aware, but the kids nowadays are super aware too. I think it more becomes an issue at the specialization piece, or just the loss of love for sports is starting to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think it's intertwined where, maybe a parent is overbearing, but maybe not. Yep. Maybe the kid just doesn't like sports that much, and they're like, I don't really like these. I want to go do band, which is great.
Yep.
Sometimes we talk about the specialization. Go look at all the other industries. Let's forget sports. If you're playing piano at a high level, you better be specializing in it or you're not going to be good. So it's just the framework we talk about it. Like I said, I think going back to my initial point of when I define it, I'm just saying, is it negatively impacting a kid? And can I see it? It's an issue, both from the psychological standpoint or the physical standpoint. It's my best way of trying to stay on one line here.
Yeah, of course. And then Elle, if you wanted to chime in there.
I just, so from the research that I state and that I usually peek at, the definition of sports specialization is intense year-round training in a single sport with exclusion from other sports, period. That's how, when I talk that is the definition I'm using. And that doesn't, and I totally agree, it doesn't include that you have to play, 3 high school sports a year and compete at them, but it's that you're excluding them. So to try to, when I talk it, that's what I'm saying. I think some interesting points that have been shown is that for the most part, right now, research doesn't show that like an early intense training is essential to reach an elite level. So Matt, you tweeted today about, Tiger and Federer and or whatever. So Tiger,
the Williams
Federer,
sisters.
the Williamses, like there were prodigies. They had a structure right from the get-go when they were young. I'm sorry, Federer is not in that. He is the other side of that. He played multiple sports until he was in his teens. And then he was like, oh, I'm really good at this tennis thing. Let me roll, let me go with it. But, so I think that education to parents, that the multidisciplinary or different sports, it does carry over your athleticism. It does not carry over the technical skill, right? So the stat of it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill is where having a club in your hand often leads to mastery. Playing the piano often leads to mastery if that's your thing. This was actually a blog I wrote, so I'm kind of pulling from it, but it, definitely improved success for most kids is when they start intense training at the age of 15 or later, and higher burnout is associated if they specialize before 12, I believe. And most kids start to specialize by 10. So now you're starting to see these landmarks. So before 12, and Matt, this can be another conversation we've had, and Matt, we've had this with Fred, is, when you're getting those younger kids, and I'll loop back to this for you, but when we get those younger kids who their parents want them to be training for golf and they're in 5th grade, what does that look like, right? In my head, it's like, get to monkey bars, climb, pull up, do this, do that, play splat ball, play tennis, play this, play that, do other things. So managing people's expectations there, and then the reasons from an early specialization side, kids tend to drop out of sports, as high as 20% is due to sport injury. So some of that, again, and we can have some debate on that, is that because of specialization, or is it because of under preparation, right? Are they just under prepared for what they're doing? Are we not taking into account sleeping, nutrition? Are we not taking into account months off of the year where they're, playing pickup versus playing intensely kind of thing? So 20% of athletes who drop out due to their sport is because of injury. And then other reasons include kids who perceive high criticism from their parents. And then the long-term effect is that dropping out of a sport does reduce their overall physical activity for life. So I was just reading an article the other day about how ACL injuries lead to poorer cardiovascular health as people get older. And I got to rip into that and understand that a little more. My gut reaction is, because they don't work out as hard, because their knee still hurts, because their rehab sucked, or they're, are they're under prepared for what they're doing. So, I think, that under preparation discussion in, the specialization side, because people are spending more time on the technical skills at age 10, 11, 12 than they are with global fitness. So it's time spent with these things versus, all that. So, Matt, to toss it back to you, I do wonder, we've had a couple conversations, one with another personal trainer of, how do you manage when young kids come in and their parents want them to get stronger for golf, right? So they're like, I'm in 5th grade. How old's a 5th grader?
10.
I don't know. 10?
10. Yeah.
11? 10? Let's say 10.
10. Yeah.
10 years old. Start training my kid. Yeah. It's like, so start training me. I want to be the best I can be for this. How do you manage that? Because it's clearly they're coming to you with something they want. And, I always struggle, right? There's business side, and then there's like, what's the best for them? And if you say no, they are going to go find somebody else that's going to train them. So you can't say no, because they're going to find it. And to me, you're the one that you want them to be with because of how you look at the big picture. But how do you manage that when the young kids come in?
Yeah, I mean, it's because we've identified what specialized is in this conversation, right? That's good segue from Al. It's like, okay, now we've kind of identified this, like, how are you looking for it? And then when you get these people coming in, it's like, okay, now how am I going to build this program and assess if this kid is truly specialized or not, even though we hate the word?
Well, to be honest with you, you have to be confident in this field too. And I try not to BS as much as I can. I love saying I don't know, because my favorite response actually.
Yeah,
currently.
me too.
But I also am waiting for these parents, because I want to be the one to at least assist them in their thinking and say, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the best part is, like, right now, for the reality of what I'm doing, I have a group of middle schoolers. So when a mom or a father comes in with their kid and they're like, wow, this is golf training? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
They're in 5th grade. And they're like, wow. I'm like, we still are doing rotational stuff, just in a fun way. And sometimes that's my selling. That's the way I sell, is I will, like, hey, please just come to the group. And I would love for you to watch, because the entire group knows how to squat, lunge, hinge, rotate, land, all of these things. They know how to do it properly. But like I said, we'll throw a Nerf basketball right in the middle. We'll play wall ball right in the middle. And sometimes my selling point, that's one way I've done it, where I just have the parent come, and sometimes it's just seeing it. They don't even need, they see how much fun I'm having, how much the kids are having, but at the same time, it's also not the world. And they're saying, wow, he's really cueing all these kids on their knee position, their foot position. They don't know. That's now, you stepped into my world now. And now when I go over to have a conversation with them, 20 minutes into the session, I'm like, hey, so this is what they're doing. And they're like, I'm just dropping him off. He'll be here 3 times a week. That's one way I've done it in the past, because I've had the luxury of having groups. But this is my current group, my golf group, where I've also, when you join the group now, I send you an email immediately. You want to join the group? Here's an email from me, with, as genuine and as authentic as I can be. Here's who I am as a person. Here's my experience. If you need to know that, I am TPI certified, because that's a big deal, but that doesn't mean anything. The very end says, just so you know, you're joining the juniors group. This is from 5th to 8th grade. My job is to prepare them physically for life, period. Then I need to make sure they're enjoying it, period. Then by the time they're a freshman, now they have so many qualities. Now maybe we can start training specific to whatever that sport might be. Okay, but if it's golf that we're talking about, yes, okay. At that point, now they are rotating, and because they're bigger and stronger, because they've got 4 years of training with a coach, well, they're going to be swinging the golf club faster. So now now that they have that buy-in, now I can go train them properly. They understand. I half of these kids I have right now could probably train a high school group if they had the ability to communicate with them, just because of their knowledge of why we're doing stuff. But that's my reality of how I've been doing it. Like, if I had someone just come in and they're questioning me big time, you have to find a way, first off, to make them understand. And like I said, if there's no group present, I will just ask the parent to stay, because I want the parent to see it. In the private sector, they're the ones paying for it. But if I can sell the kid, doesn't matter, because the parent is going home, the mom or dad's going home and say, or the kid is going home to mom and dad saying, I don't know, I love this. I got to go back. And that's actually how my groups usually start, with one kid, and then the referral system. Then all the parents talk, and then next thing you know, you got 10 kids all coming in, and they think they're coming to golf-specific training at 5th grade, and no, we're just getting generally stronger and getting having a plethora of exposures.
And you can communicate that, right? So, I mean, some of that comes down to the communication and the connecting the dots. So having a hip hinge is crucial for golfing, right? So, like, even though in your mind, you're like, I'm going to get a hip hinge so that they have a hip hinge, so they overall for life reduce stress on their back and hold their hamstrings well and strengthen them and all these other great things that happen with it. You can communicate and say, oh, this is going to help your golf swing. Hey, have you seen, John Rahm deadlifting? Follow TPI on this, because you'll see them doing these exercises. And even though you're in your head, you're training them for life, the communication back can also always be curved to what their sport is, if you're building the overall person. So, I mean, that's how I find things a lot, is that, even if I'm, somebody's doing something and I look at hip hinge and rotation and it's stiff, I'm like, well, if you're a golfer, like, you have to be able to turn through that. So that might affect their sitting and their squatting and other things in their daily life. But if they mostly care about golf, I'm going to talk about it from golf. I'm not going to talk about it from getting up from a chair. I'm going to talk about it from golf, because that will resonate with them. So, I mean, to your point, that communication and the, I think this is another area where everybody can improve, is in all aspects, not even fitness and health and all that, but is connect the dots from what you're saying to what the goal is. And then once you do that and people trust you, you can speak however the hell you want. And they just refer to you as crazy Allison. Like, yeah. I'm just going to her. She got it. You know,
yeah. It's interesting too that, Matt, you see, thank God that the consumers, the parents, actually do connect the dots, that we should give them enough credit that if they just kind of see it once, even though they're not doing a golf activity, that they do see what you're doing translates to the sport. It's a little bit of the it's like Karate Kid when Mr. Miyagi was training Danielson. He was having him paint his house and wax the cars, and like, what the hell's going on? And then finally he connected the dots and the movements he was doing. Allison's done this with me a ton when I've been having wrist pain or shoulder pain. She gives me all these things and these little games to do, and like, keep this ball balanced on your back. And I'm just thinking about that. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I didn't even know it. You mind fucked me. Like, my shoulder's like way better just from doing these movements. The fact that the parents see that when they're looking at the activities that aren't specific to the sport is encouraging. So it's a quick proof of concept. And that sounds like that, like that's one of the first major hurdles to kind of changing the culture around the language we use around all this stuff, and getting more people to buy in to, thinking from the old ways.
I just want to touch on one point there. Another issue with this is we have to also remember that parents deal with a lot of garbage in all of the industries, bad coaching, bad organizations. Why should they trust you? You are nobody when they first meet you. You know what I mean? You have to be completely open to that. And honestly, that's why, and again, like I worked on a staff where this is all we did. I had great mentors teaching me how to think about this stuff, how to position yourself. If there is a parent, say hello. Don't turn your back to them and think that you're better than them. That's their kid. That's their child over there. Like, they want to see what's going on. And if you educate them, then back to what we're doing with connecting the dots. No, now we're helping the kid, which at the end of the day is the most important. If the parent's on board and understands, oh, okay, I saw you doing this with coach today. Cool. Now the kid's talking about it with their parents. We talked about in the beginning with sometimes the communication with a kid and their parent. It's not about the sport. They just have a bad relationship with communication. Now you just opened up another avenue that you helped. You didn't even realize it. And it's all these little things that come with making sure that everybody feels like they're part of the team. And honestly, I've seen it work with the kids really well. And honestly, that's why I have a great relationship with parents. I also have a cheat code. I train parents of the kids that I work with. And they teach me more on a daily basis. Half of our session is we're working out. We get it. Yeah. But they're just teaching me about all these things to think about as a coach. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's tough to be a parent. I'm not a parent yet.
Dude, me neither.
I feel like one because I deal with a bunch of kids.
Yeah, I'm just an uncle to Allison's kids, and that's like enough for me right now. But
I'm just as a mom, I'm trying to figure out how the hell to fight what goes on, right? I mean, because then you have your kids. Then you have your kids who want to do things, you know what I mean? Like, and they want to be with their friends. And if they're all their friends, so, obviously we're trying to build stuff where people can, lean on us or lean on our referrals. So hopefully, when my kids get there, their group of their network is something in which I trust. So like that to me is one of my whys behind what I do. So that as my kids go through this, if they want to be, then they can be involved in what I would consider a good, I don't know if there's one right, but a good way that promotes health and well-being for the rest of our lives and not burns kids out and, turns them off to movement and exercise, which we got to have another hour for that.
Yeah. But the key here is, Matt, like the communication style is the factor here, right? It's not your programming. It's not your expertise. It's all this other stuff that opens the doors that allows you to do your programming. This is something that I've tied into other industries as we've had and we were talking before the podcast, how we've had multiple industry experts on. I'll see it in the business world. Like somebody's awesome with data and analytics and stats and KPIs for a business. They can't write an email for shit. They can't communicate to their boss. They don't understand why that stat is important, what it means, and then give it to the sales and marketing people of like, hey, this is how we're going to advertise this great idea to the market. But they can crunch that number like nobody else, but they can't talk. Well, if they could talk, if they could relate to somebody, if they got away from the computer screen for 10 minutes and didn't specialize in that one thing of just learning how to crunch that number, they could be a salesperson too, and generalize your skill set and get people to buy in. That sounds, aside from any expertise that you have, that it's all this other stuff of being able to just be a goddamn human and talk to somebody and be like, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is why your kid's going to love it. And by the way, I'm solving your communication problems with your kid that you never talk to anymore at home. Like now you're talking about all this stuff. Like it helps like this whole macro picture of happiness that allows you to then just implement your program with like the least amount of questions.
Yeah. And you know what too? And honestly, these professions though, they're not for everybody also. Yeah. Unfortunately, this whole profession has gotten diluted. I'm only speaking from the strength and fitness personal training profession, but I was a kid. Dude. I was an athlete. I can relate to these kids because I was a kid. And even though I had great parents, I didn't communicate with them. If something was bothering me, I had a great friend group that I had from sports. Yeah. I'm using my background to relate to a lot of kids. And honestly, the best coaches I've been able to talk to and see, they can relate like this in 2 seconds. It doesn't matter what it is. And you can relate to a kid. Now they have someone to lean on. And you don't know, forget specialization, you don't know how many kids you can save. Maybe they're having a really bad day and it's a rough world they live in right now. Yeah. Now they have someone to go to. And it's why I love being around the youth, because sometimes I always ask, like, how are we doing today? And I could just see it, right? I know. Yeah. Oh, we had it's test, coach, it's tests. Like, can we just not work out today? I'm like, yes, it's okay. I don't have to be the head coach all the time. I love it. I love when it's like, okay, guess what? I got my cleats packed in my car right now. For my first session, we're going outside and we're doing straight up just tag out on the fields. Yep. They already know what's coming, but these kids are excited for what Wednesdays have already become because they're out of the weight room, and it's like they get to just go be kids for a little bit. And I always bring that back where just put yourself in the kid nowadays, put yourself in their shoes and see what's really going on, because they got way more stressors than we think. I mean, not us here, but just in general in these fields. In general. Yeah.
I know we're running short on time. Al, if it's cool, I would love, and Matt, obviously, I'd love to take maybe like this last 5-10 minutes and say, and this always drives me crazy and then Allison crazy too when I'm asking her, but because it's like, there's got to be, I always ask her for an answer. Is this good or is this bad? Or, does this work or not? She's like, well, it depends. And never gives me a great answer. Because
I told you that 2 years ago. Now it's wrong. That was one recently.
Okay. Well, yeah, but like usually there's not a right answer, but it's like for parent, like some sort of takeaway for today, right? With like parents who have a kid and they're concerned about this and they're aware that it's a topic today and they're aware that there's risk of injury. They're aware of burnout. Is there like 4 or 5, 6, 7, 10 bullets that you kind of have in your head of like, these are generally for more people, with probably exceptions, the types of stuff that I would want a kid between 10 and 12 to start with from a programming standpoint, philosophically, tactically, however you see it. So that, and then maybe some red flags that parents should be looking out for in the activities or sports that they're doing and participating in, to make sure that they're not steering their kid on this wrong track, because they do have that influence of affecting this stuff highly, with their influence being parents and all.
Is that to me?
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. So first off, I think when we go from, I'm just going to use middle school to freshmen and sophomores in high school. Yeah. They should be playing multiple sports. And again, let's define, I don't mean a year-round 4 intense season. I'm just saying play sports, but we should also encourage play as parents, in my opinion. Yep. Okay. Parents, be aware of what's going on with, if you are traveling every single weekend to a soccer tournament and you're playing 3 games per day and your kid is exhausted from playing 6 games and you've lost another weekend and you do that for 2 years, start to connect those dots and just use common sense.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to learn as a parent. We get wrapped up in, everybody has all Google and you can go research all this stuff. How about you just call a college coach if you think your kid's going to go play? College coaches love to talk about it, and they might tell you, hey, I really don't know. Like your kid is pretty good. We'll come watch him, but he or she, like, they don't need to specialize right now. They're only a sophomore.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes a voice of reason. You have to trust people, just like we talked about. But also go find a coach or somebody in the area that you think can help your kid. You know, if for some reason you're in a soccer organization and 10 of these kids are going to another location to do personal training or whatever, and they're really good at soccer, well, go see what that's about.
Yeah.
Don't think that you have the only answer, and be aware. But I would say the communication with your kid, but also the communication with other coaches too. And like, just be aware of, there's a lot of garbage out there, but there's also a lot of good out there. And at the end of the day, if you're in a sport where you're only playing one of them and your kid's not happy with it, be aware of that. But talk to your kids. Talk to your kids. Coaches, this is to the coaches too, though. Like, talk to your kids. Yeah. Maybe you can be the person where you start to sense that a burnout is happening, or, you know what, I don't know, every time they come off of this weekend, so-and-so is just not feeling right. There's something up. You might want to go get this checked out, or maybe we need to dial back that. I would also tell this to everybody, for the parents, the team approach of the parent and the kid, you need to lay out your calendar. What I mean by that is if you're playing sports, I don't care if it's the time you're 12, but if you're playing somewhat competitive sports, you got to have a calendar look at, here's when we're taking rest time from this intense sport at a young age. We're not looking at it like that. So next thing you know, you got 8 years that gone by and your kid hasn't taken a rest. And you're thinking you're doing the right things. You know, sometimes lay it out for yourself and say, okay, well, I'm still the parent in this situation. I'm going to look at this, and guess what? They're on 97 different baseball teams. We're going to cut half of those, and we're going to take a vacation.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I think always the little things are going to work best. But for the bullet point of that one, just look at the calendar year. Like, okay, we are going to allot the rest, because they don't know. Their schedule's terrible. They got 10 months where they're doing 7 hours a day in a school, and they got however many hours of work. And that's starting at the middle school level too. You got all of this homework. So that's another stressor. So be aware of that, but help them, like, guide them with their own calendar. Like, okay, this is when we're going to take a month off. And then, from my world, I really think it's advantageous for, unless you're a parent that has a background in physical fitness or something like that, you got to get your kids involved in actual strength training. But we know strength training doesn't mean heavy weights at 12 years old, but movement preparations, like we talked about in the beginning, like just getting a huge base. A missing piece is play. They do not play the way that I did, the way that you guys did growing up, and we still have to teach that. And I think finding those answers is not the easiest thing in the world, but at least you're trying to do the right things, and you're looking at a schedule, and you're looking at things from a realistic approach rather than just making claims like specialization, like sport specific. Yeah. Oh, he's going to play this. He's got to play 3 sports. He can't play 3 sports. He needs to just be aware of, like, reality of what's going on, and also understand too the other stressors that a kid faces nowadays. I think that's another one. I know it's not necessarily towards sports specifically, but just understand that the hours of work that they have homework wise, it's different than when you were a kid. They have hours of homework, and there is a pressure of school, and you have to help them mediate. Okay, this is when I also need a rest period from school as well. And here's how you balance these things. They're trying to jam in homework, working out, and some kind of play in 3 hours every night. Whole nother topic.
Well, it is. And dude, and it's sparked so many triggers in me in corporate America. It's like, then you wonder why these kids, when they're 30, are at a desk, not using their vacation time, working for a job that they don't hate, not looking at their calendar and saying, you know what, I just need like 2 days to just like reset and think and take care of the other areas of my life so that I can be productive in this. I think that one just like triggered home, because I've been plugged into the matrix of corporate America for a long time, and you see it manifest, and it's like just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And people just aren't conscious of it because they're going. And well, when the hell did that start? And it probably started and by the way, it's not the parents' fault. I'm saying it started with the school system. It started with the education system. And what you're saying, like, this is all, dude, this is our platform, like built on developing yourself. It's like, look at like, just take on that responsibility. Understand that, like, the system's not great. The kids are going to be burnt out. You have a lot more control than you think by laying out that calendar. And by doing that, you're alleviating so much pressure that the kid will feel, and then allow them to excel at these sports that they actually love, versus like learning to hate it, but not have the courage to like step away from it because they don't want to disappoint anyone. So like total parallel to like the larger picture that we always talk about here.
No doubt. Very good. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming
guys,
on.
I appreciate it.
Always love
I think we
to.
sparked about 10 different topics, but
We
It's
did.
good. It's
Dude,
good, but they all loop together. You know, they all
Yeah,
loop together. They're all important. You know, I think some of the platform for us is the education behind this, and then really what are professionals saying versus what is being publicized social media wise versus what are we just thinking is right, you know, is stuff that we're trying to call out and let people see that isn't what we all want for our kids. That isn't what we all want for life. Like, how do we stop it? And it comes down to educating ourselves first.
A lot of the flashy accounts are not you too, because you're actually doing the work and
Right.
have time to be these catchy, flashy things in the window. So, like that's part of it. But you know, I think on your guys' side, and this is what I pushed Al, like, you have to be more visible. Like today, you know, like we have to get the message out. That's why we wanted to have you. So, it sounds like you're trying to do that work, and that's all we can ask. And you did spark like 100 different topics, so we can always have you back for part 2 and 3, man. No doubt.
I'm ready whenever.
All right, let's do it. I would love to.
All right, cool.
All right.
All right,
So-
everyone. You know what to do.
Thanks, guys.
Like, subscribe, hit down below. We'll see you on the next episode. Body Movement.